it's going to be an issue. And you look, and the Chinese are in the middle of all this stuff too, because the last thing they want to do is drive up food prices and get American farmers saying, well, I'm not selling you chicken for that. You're going to pay this. I'm not selling my pigs to you, Smithfield. You're going to pay that. So I think, we're getting a lot of that cloudiness too, because, the biggest food consumer in the world doesn't want food prices to go higher. So, yeah, but I think it'll leak out here and there. But I don't think the American people are unaware anymore. They go to the grocery store 3 to 4 times a week. They fill their tank up once or twice a week. It's out there. Okay. People are already lost faith in the narratives being presented to them as facts. We're not the 14th and 15th century. Okay. Where if southern France had a failed harvest, people in southern France died because they couldn't get crops that were in southern Italy that were in abundance. You just couldn't move the crops. That's why the supply chain thing kind of scares me more than anything else. If we're unable or unwilling to move foodstuffs and energy across the world, then we can repeat the disaster of the 14th and 15th and 16th centuries.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for joining us again for the next month's talk here. I'm with Bob Kudla, tradelikeagenius.com. Have you seen what has happened in the last 1 month since we had a few ideas of how 2022 might roll out and affect your lives with so many different things? The Arab Spring, remember that chapter in history? Well, we might very well be repeating another one of those. Wanted to talk to Bob about that today. Kazakhstan's on the tip of everybody's lips. 40% of uranium production globally, in addition to potash, and that is the hub of Asia. And if you didn't know how much aquifer cubic kilometers, I think there's about 100,000 cubic kilometers of water on the periphery nations, in addition to Kazakhstan. It is, outside of the Nubian Sandstone Aquifer, the largest amount of reserve water under the planet. And we come into the fertilizer shortages, which are going to be about 12% globally. The herbicides you might start to hear about now. And when words like anhydrous start to make the water cooler talk, well, you're right in the middle of a repeating chapter of history. We're going to go short-term chapter of history, Arab Spring. Well, we can go out into different multi-century cycles when governments collapse, people migrate, and famine sweeps the land. How will governments react, do you think, is probably the question. So, Bob, I appreciate you joining me again so we can try to get a little more insight into this whole Kazakhstan. I talked about Kyrgyzstan in the last series of videos last month about how important it was to get those aquifers on the border area with Kazakhstan up and running so they could get their greenhouses put out to produce food. But hey, I wonder if that's related.
Yeah, Dave, Happy New Year. So 2022, as we've described it over the last couple of months, is playing out, to a T. So we're at a point now where there's a dollar shortage around the world. It seems bizarre because everybody always thinks, oh my gosh, the dollar, is it's being ruined by all this deficit spending. But you have to understand the dollar is basically it's one of many in a basket. And so if you're producing more euros or more yen or more yuan, and you also borrow in dollars that you don't pay back, you create what's called a dollar shortage. And that's what we have right now. Believe it or not, there's a dollar shortage out there. And the Fed has been desperate to try to push more dollars in. While a lot of the deficit spending has been happening, they're trying to push more dollars out there. Economic activity has been stagnant. You wouldn't think so because of all the supply shortages, because you think demand is so high, but it's really supply issues. And now we find ourselves back into another Arab Spring. I call it the worldwide winter is coming because, people think, oh, inflation, higher prices, that means stock markets are going to go up. Well, actually, if you read your history books, the stock markets hate inflation. In the beginning, they like it. At the end, it's like eating too many potato chips. And if you're a country like Turkey, which this time is where it started, where you don't have enough energy to feed your people or enough farmland, or you don't have enough energy to heat and run transportation, that you have to go ahead and import those things, then you become a failed state. And Turkey is a failed state right now. So it's the wrong place in the world for a country in that situation to be, failing. And then all we have to do is drift a little bit north and a little bit east, and we got our second domino falling, is Kazakhstan. Now, Kazakhstan's falling for essentially the same reasons, but not they don't have the same situation. They're falling because they have an oligarchy-run country, and they basically squeeze their people to where they can't afford anything anymore. And so the government doesn't generate enough revenue, through taxation, because it's all being siphoned off by basically the Kazakh mob, which I'm sure is being enabled by the Russian and the Chinese mobs. And they have a situation now where that country is starting to implode. Normally, should we care? Well, Kazakhstan is absolutely critical to the world economy. They're 40% of the uranium production. You mentioned potash. They're an important fertilizer producer, but they're also a huge oil and gas producer. And their railroad tracks run across their country from China into Europe. And they just dropped this country into the lap of Mother Russia. And so now you have the Russians, if we just continue on this game of thrones, if you will, we got Mother Russia now, that was a marginal producer of wheat in the world. And they're agitating against the Ukraine, which would make them even more powerful in that regard. Oil, natural gas, and strategic metals. Now you add uranium and fertilizer and more strategic minerals with Kazakhstan, and oh, by the way, impose a toll on China and Europe for the crosswise traffic. You have a recipe for a flashpoint, in addition to all the other supply and demand, implications that Russia controlling Kazakhstan will do. So that is all eyes on Kazakhstan. I personally am interested in it because I have a very large position in uranium and CCJ. It's really weird. All the places where they have strategic metals, the other place in the world that has it is in Canada. So if there's potash problems, there's Canadian Potash Company, MOS. So during today, I'm going to give people 5 or 6 stocks you got to own. Okay, whether you buy my service or not, you got to own these for your own personal well-being. Mosaic is one of them. CCJ is another one. 2 large productions of minerals in our hemisphere. Think Western Hemisphere if you want to own anything, and make sure it's not going to get stolen from you. Okay, and then you turn around and now the shipping is still not resolved. So you have shipping companies as well. And I'll take a breath, and you and I could talk some more. But those 2 things are critical into food production and energy production, and basically Europe in the balance. And you're going to start seeing all those issues start to amplify here in 2022.
Let me throw another side of that triangle of nastiness, if you will. On the 15th of January here, unless truckers can provide proof of vaccination, they're not going to be able to cross the Canadian-US border. Now they're looking at around 15% of all truckers to say no, and that number might increase a little bit higher. But they're looking at the amount of goods, and you have to do some math with that. 70% of the $700 billion that the U.S. does in cross-border trade, trucking on land trade, runs through 18-wheel traffic to get it in and out. So how's that going to affect the states that rely so heavily on Canada for the imports? And then if you look at Kazakhstan, their wheat, 10 million tons of wheat. Now we're not in the planting season right now, but the world's going to be struggling with the fertilizer and the herbicide shortages, and 10 million tons to add into something that's depleting globally would be nice. But imagine if you, like you say, they're right in that crossroads of the new Silk Road that China had set up and counted on it being its own, and nobody would ever, interfere with that because they're China. But here we are. If you pull that one piece out, their entire new Silk Road doesn't work any longer. And all these flashpoints are here. And it's just going to be a meltdown in supply chains. And then, Canada, Kazakhstan, and there's other points with the Ukraine. But it seems like there's a lot of things happening at the same time on this planet that are all pointing to get ready.
Oh, that's my cue. So the Canadian issue is very, very, very interesting to me, because truckers are kind of a weird lot, right? They're very fiercely independent, even ones that are probably vaccinated. And you have to understand too, those truckers don't have to go to Canada. We have a trucker shortage in the United States. Those truckers are happy to carry loads somewhere else. But that's why we have a shipping crisis in the country, because the California government won't let trucks over a certain age on the roads. Okay, and so that's why we can't pull the containers off the ships and on the trucks and out of the state because of that. Yeah, Canada. Look, Canada's on my list of failed states. I think they're in deep weeds. So I wouldn't be surprised over the next 5 to 10 years that the Western Canadian provinces, sans British Columbia, sues for inclusion into as like Puerto Rico into the United States, because those provinces are allowed constitutionally to leave Canada. They're basically an amalgamation like the United States, but they can walk away. Remember when Quebec wanted to walk away, and everybody said go because Quebec just sucks tax revenue from everywhere else in the provinces, and they wouldn't survive without, unless they try to connect themselves back to France, and which I don't think the Quebecos really wanted that. They just wanted to, assert some sort of game internally. But Canada could just easily bust apart. And if China or Russia then decides they want to engage, the United States will have no choice but to get involved and not allow that to happen. So it's going to be interesting to watch. But let's talk shipping here, because there's another way to make money. So here's another stock you guys want to put on your list. ZIM. Okay, it pays massive dividends. We have a shipping shortage the next year. There's a few other shipping stocks that we're trading in and out of right now, all pay good dividends. So put that one on your list too. There's 3 right there that you're going to be fine with. And the fourth one is political. Dave, let's tie this whole thing up into a bow now. Is that because we're hyper politicized right now? We're going into an election in the United States, and guess who owns a social media empire that is being given birth in February? President Trump. Okay, the vehicle that they're using is DWAC, DWAC. We're in it. We've been in it, and today, and last week, and this week, and again today, is making these $10, $15 moves higher, and we're making tons of money trading this thing. This thing was $180 when it first came out, dropped all the way back down into the upper 30s, and now we're back up to $63 again. And they're launching in February, and I suspect that the interest level of this stock's going to go through the roof. And I think we'll see this thing back in triple digits in no time at all. I mean, it has no problem breathing and moving up $12, $15, $20. So there's another opportunity for people here. Throw a little bit in your IRA. You can trade it on your regular accounts. These moving parts, interesting for us, trading, is that I love moving parts because you make money on moving parts. When the stock market's kind of benign and grinding, you can make money, but not nearly as profitable as when the markets are seizing up like they are right now and not knowing what to do. So that's the fourth one, and I'll have one more for you before we end the show today.
Yeah, let me tie a bow on top of the bow there. When is it that the realization for the general public to all these things that are happening really comes home? Like you always talk mama bear. When is mama bear going to understand that with all the political turmoil, the shortages in here, it's really going to affect what goes on the dinner table? How are they going to mitigate that? And to cut out the discourse of these problems that we're all facing, and we all need to find solutions. Of course, everybody's going to gravitate to a platform where people will be allowed more free speech and be able to express the ideas and then have a real conversation instead of just say, hey, I have a little bit different idea. Listen to it. If you think it's valid, we'll talk about it more. If you don't think it's valid, call me a kook and we're done. Great, I'll take that. But as soon as you put out a different idea or opinion against the narrative, then suddenly they just try to remove you. So these gargantuan sets of problems that are dovetailing, and they are wrapping into a package that we haven't seen in how many centuries do you think, since this amount of, intertwining, I guess, triggering downfalls and the next cascade to the next cascade. I'm going to say, at least 100, 200 to 400 years since we're seeing so much turmoil happening at the same time. When do you think the general populace will wake up? Because that's going to trigger a lot of other, what you're talking about, movements in the markets, purchase pattern changes, spending habits. Money's going to move into different sectors. And when people behave differently and think differently, then the whole entire landscape of commercial, and it could be out at supermarkets or any types of services. Some are just going to die off and tumbleweed out into the desert there, but others are going to be well needed. So if you can kind of take a look at where these problems are when the awakening comes for the general populace and how they're going to move like a herd, because they're like herd animals. They're going to move. And I'm sorry if I'm calling you not herd animal, but people move in herds and mentality. Look at the news, people move. And when they get into a certain mentality, they're going to move. And they're not only going to move markets, they're going to shift reality itself. And the panic might start. And then, how's that going to be dealt with? So these moving parts, continue into the future with it. What's going to be that trigger for the awakening of the average everyday person understanding it? And then how will they actuate on that information?
Yeah, it already started. You have to look no further than look at population migrations in the United States over the last 18 months. So we're moving from blue to red. We're moving from big city to small. So people are starting to vote with their pocketbook. California lost 1% of its population, unheard of. And I think that the next election is going to basically give voice to all these things in a landslide from blue to red across the spectrum. Well, that's broken now too. So I think this is 2022, the year of broken bonds, which needs to happen. When things rise, they kind of rise like in a gentle slope, but when things fall, they break. They call it the escalator up, the elevator down. And it has to be by human nature, because people don't like to change. They don't like to take pain unless pain is imposed upon them. And so I think you're going to continually see this, and which is fascinating. Not all of this is bad, Dave. You and I talked about this before with climate change. We're not the 14th and 15th century, okay, where if southern France had a failed harvest, people in southern France died because they couldn't get crops that were in southern Italy that were in abundance. You just couldn't move the crops. That's why the supply chain thing kind of scares me more than anything else. If we're unable or unwilling to move foodstuffs and energy across the world, then we can repeat the disaster of the 14th and 15th and 16th centuries. If not, then I think it's going to be inconvenient for some and more hardship for others. And so, it's coming. And here's the fifth stock for you guys, BGS. Okay, is a food supply company. If you want to get Andy, ANDE, or if you want to get Kroger, those are good as well. Because look, we're embedded in the inflation side now. So no matter what they do, we've crossed the Rubicon where the pricing pressure is now pushing through the snake. And even if you raise interest rates and doubled interest rates, it still doesn't stop things from happening, because some of these things are irrespective of constraint, like uranium, for example. They have to buy uranium. People have to eat. And if you have supply problems, that doesn't lessen demand. It just means something else doesn't get bought, because you're going to pour more of your money into. And the other thing too is, because we're all older now, a lot of us aren't carrying the debt loads we carried when we were in our 30s and 40s. And like my situation, I can literally sell my home. I can move from where I live and move to where you live and not have a mortgage and maintain my lifestyle. So I just freed up a couple more $1,000 a month to either not earn it, right, and do what's happening in the economy now. 4% of the people my age left the workforce. That's why we're having these problems. And the kids, that should be in the lower rung jobs, they're trading cryptos, okay, or they just got flushed with the government. So they're not in the workforce unless they get pushed into the workforce. They don't see a benefit of working because they know they can't get ahead. So those things are persistent. So it's going to be really interesting to see how they get and move out of these positions with higher interest rates. It's going to fail short term.
Yeah, let me pick your brain on an article I was reading about a vendor had a product and was offered a Walmart contract. But the stipulation in the contract was, we pay you at 120 days. And he was like, no way. And I don't know if we're going to see the same thing with this food and supply chain, more mainly focused on foods, where the supplier or the seller, the grower of the food, will more happily deal with somebody who's paying at delivery and they're walking out of there with a check in their hand, or on a 30-day, versus some of these conglomerates and corporate entities are out at 120 days. And they're trying to bring on new supply chains where, part of their traditional feed into supply XYZ store could be fresh produce, could be fruits, could be frozen fish, meats, whatever. Well, something got knocked out in that particular leg of the supply chain. So they're out there looking for something else, different countries of origin, different states of origin, whatever it would be. But I was just curious what you think about, going to cash is king, where suppliers and sellers of food really will just say, anybody that's paying me longer than 30 days or not going to pay me in cash immediately, I don't want to deal with. And then what kind of stores and, corporations are running on that? Or it's going to be smaller, I would believe, but I'm just curious what you think about that. That was the crux of the article. Now, any teeth in that, or do you think they're just talking out the side of their mouth?
No, I think it's both. And, look, if you're talking like Walmart and Amazon and stuff like that, people do those deal with the devil. And this I've experienced here because I ran strategic planning business development for a large corporation. The trade-off is that, you allow me to do it's basically called negative inventory, right? So they'll sell the product before they pay you. All right. So they're running what's called negative inventory, which is they're basically, you're floating them. But the benefit to you is that they're going to give you a large market. Okay. You roll that dice when you have excess supply, that you want to go ahead and make sure you're covering your fixed costs. The downside is you're going to wait 4 months for your money, but the upside is you will get paid, and they are consistent and they don't jerk your chain. Okay. But those are the rules, but they honor those rules. That check will come. So those are the people that aren't so much the problem. It's going to be the second tier companies that will start trying to float you, that you won't know if they're going to pay you. Okay. And those are the people where I think the issue is going to come. And, if you're a small producer, and you want to, if you can go direct to market, you're going to do awesome. Okay. If you're a small producer and you have to rely on a broker to move your product, they can really start to squeeze you. And that's what's happening a lot. That's why beef is such a problem. But I think that's going to resolve itself because farmers will get to a point where there's too much, or ranchers, where there's too much pain. And when you have too much pain, then you go ahead and you start developing co-ops, okay? Or you start doing what's called direct to customer, and then you actually hire out a company actually to perform that broker work, but they're not controlling pricing anymore. They're just actually a work product for you. So I think it's a little bit of everything. Look, at the end of the day, if I was stuck and my only customer was Amazon and Walmart or Costco, whatever, I'd feel a lot better than if my customer was Joe Schmid, broker, that he's also now getting squeezed by the grocery store. Okay. So, because that's what's going to happen. The crap's going to roll backwards. The grocery store is going to squeeze those middle guys. and the middle guys that can't compete are going to squeeze the farmer. And to the extent the farmers can band together, then they'll be fine. Or you basically skip a step and you go to the big guy like and Kroger does the same thing. Some of these big guys, they want the small producer. Okay, so I don't think they're not going to screw each other, because they know things ebb and flow. And these farmers now are getting more and more power. They're flush. The grain producers 3 years ago, remember when you couldn't get rid of your corn and wheat. You got Cargill and ADM and all those guys that are just pushing on you. Well, now your stuff's coming. They're begging you for your stuff. You're not even keeping. In fact, a lot of these farmers now are actually growing cattle on their property. There's a couple of farmers that I follow that basically just had 4 or 5 head of cattle for their own family. Now they have 50 to 100 head, and they have 800 acres of corn and wheat. Well, guess what? They're not taking that corn and wheat to the market anymore. They're throwing up elevators on their own property, and they're cracking their own grain and feeding it right to their own animals in-house. And so you're going to start seeing more of that. And so, yeah, I think, the article's not wrong, but, probably wrong enemy, if you will. The enemy is going to be the company, all those middlemen you don't know the name of. Okay. So it's going to be interesting. And so that's my view on it, is that, look, if I was a farmer, you better not get to the market directly. When I was executive at a company, I always told people that work for me, if you're not touching a customer like physically daily, you're going to be irrelevant. And I would say to a producer, if you're not touching your end user customer, the end user of your product, you're going to be irrelevant. So that's what you have to do if you're a small producer. You better be going to the people that are eventually going to consume your solution, or you're not going to make it.
Yeah, it takes so many different avenues as well. And they're down there and they're scraping bin bottoms already. And once you scrape a bin bottom clean, there's nothing else left in there. So just in your estimation, when we get these crop reports of the planting acreage, the emergence reports, the first month after emergence, we're getting all these reports here. So when do you think that the USDA will come clean with the problems we're having planting, the fertilizers there, the herbicide, the weed, broadleaf and grass controls between everything? At what point do you think that it's actually going to start making the mainstream news, where just anybody sitting at home will see it on MSNBC, or anybody sitting at home will see it on their favorite propaganda channel? At what point will the USDA come clean enough where it'll hit the business news first, like I say, MSNBC, that'll transition over into the nightly news where everybody would see it? Because there is a progression when they do plant, when they harvest, the emergence, and then, coming into last stand, projected. There's a lot of different variables that they're ticking off by the month, every 2 weeks within a month, as we start here getting into April. So timelines on that before, there is an awakening. A lot of people are understanding it, but at the full point where, oh no, we really got to start thinking about what we're going to do here now. How many months from now do you think that would be?
Yeah. When's the election? They're going to obfuscate all the way until the election.
You think they will? Huh?
Yeah, of course, because the last thing Biden wants to do is to have people know that we have a non-transitory increase in food costs. So they'll blame it on a million and myriad other things. Look, I already know they're going to blame food shortages on climate change. Okay, it's not going to be because we made the price of natural gas so high because of our stupid policies that you can't put fertilizers on the ground for the yields to go down. No, it's going to be climate change is causing yields to fall. So they're going to obfuscate. And so that doesn't change. You have to be your own Berean. You're going to have to do your own homework. They're understanding it. And also people that are being blamed are becoming more vocal, saying, hey, don't put this on me. I'm not causing this problem. The weather isn't causing this problem. And, the issue is here and here. And, and so those are things that are going to start showing up. Look, I think people are already aware of food. Look, beef prices are, where I live, they're plentiful, but very expensive. What I find fascinating is you can't get whole chickens, but you can get chicken parts. So I'm trying to, even at Costco, I'm trying to understand what's up with that. Why is that an issue? You can't get chicken wings. Why is that? Each chicken has two wings, right? If there's chicken legs, why aren't there chicken wings? So these are the kind of things that are I think people are questioning that eventually the reporters are going to do it and start talking about it. And here, I'll give you an example. So today, one of my subscribers at Trade Genius, that we have a room that we actually can talk to each other. So you're going to start seeing people say, hey, you know what? I'm losing audience. Maybe if I do an expose on why we don't have chicken parts, right? It's going to be an issue. And the Chinese are in the middle of all this stuff too, because last thing they want to do is drive up food prices and get American farmers saying, well, I'm not selling you chicken for that. You're going to pay this. I'm not selling my pigs to you, Smithfield. You're going to pay that. So I think, we're getting a lot of that cloudiness too, because, the biggest food consumer in the world doesn't want food prices to go higher. So, yeah, but I think it'll leak out here and there, but I don't think the American people are unaware anymore. They go to the grocery store 3 to 4 times a week. They fill their tank up once or twice a week. It's out there. Okay. People have already lost faith in the narratives being presented to them as facts.
And you look at government to control some of these issues, your food prices, your energy prices. I mean, getting price out of the market is exactly what happened with Kazakhstan. Now, here in the States, some of these forecasts coming out, Bank of America, $120 a barrel oil by the end of the year. And then I found oilforecast.com. And if you go out there, they're going out to 2023 at $170 a barrel, $150. I mean, at some point, people are going to go, whoa, you know what? The right to rule needs to be revoked, because what was given as you're supposed to control this to keep the economy moving, opportunities coming, things at a cheaper level of cost so we can enjoy our lives while we continue to be tax slaves here. Once all that goes out and it's strictly working just to have a roof over your head, pay your taxes and eat, at that point, the right to rule is being revoked. So, higher oil prices coming into that too. It's going to be a rude awakening coming up. Like I say, if you believe that they're going to obfuscate all the way out until the election, and then suddenly people just go to the grocery store in December and things have tripled or not available, and they just don't get the mechanisms of the inputs into the farming. And then they realize that, wait, all this information wasn't being told to us. Who hid this information all through the planting season, all through the summer? And then at that point, there might be some very vocal people on the street. And then where do we see it again? That just reverts us right back to the beginning of what the talk here was. We get back into an Arab Spring. I mean, is it possible in the States to have an Arab Spring? I'm really curious.
Yeah, I mean, look, we're already having it. We just do it differently here in the United States. We're geographically diverse. Okay, so it's not like one country where you have single points of failure. The United States is more durable than that. Our Constitution is decentralized. Our political leadership is decentralized. Our country is geographically decentralized. So our economic is economically decentralized. Our population is decentralized. So we won't have a spring like that. Everybody always wants to foment that, but the fomenters are all sitting in cities. Okay. And so their ability to reach is quite limited, and so I don't worry. That's not on my worry list. What's on my worry list are these supply chains breaking down that will cause real harm to people in certain parts of the world. I think people don't realize that Los Angeles, okay, you have to go through 3 passes to get out of LA. People don't know that. You got to go through Banning Pass to get out to the east. You got the Cajon Pass to get out towards Vegas. You got the Grapevine to get out towards the coast. And if you head south, you're in Mexico, right? So, and then same with in San Diego, you have to go through about 3 or 4 passes to get out into El Centro, right? Or out into the Borrega Desert. So, it's very it's very easy for like LA, where you can get supplies chopped up. The Long Beach Harbor sits on the Newport Inglewood fault. Okay, we had a 8 or 7.0 earthquake or 6.6 or whatever in Long Beach in the 30s. Can you imagine an earthquake of that magnitude hitting within 3 or 4 miles of the port of Long Beach? Okay, it'll tear out all the railroad lines there. Okay, because they head straight on through across that fault. You know where they put that new stadium, SoFi Stadium, sitting right over top of the Newport Inglewood fault in Inglewood. Okay, and it runs right off my coast, runs right down to San Diego, where you have the Rose Canyon fault, which is a 9.0 potential earthquake. So LA and San Francisco and Seattle could all go offline with a major geological effect. So I worry more about those things with a fragile supply chain. And the reason why we're fragile is because we have the central governments that you just eloquently put out there, involved in every way, shape, or form of our life. They create fragility. So that's what I worry more about. I worry about what the government will do to people in terms of just incompetence and interference, than I worry about the American people rising up against each other. Okay, and we'll be tested with that, and it won't take much, and I think those things will be more likely to come to pass, and that's why you have to have backup, if you will, within your own life. And I think a lot of people are already noting that. What's the benefit of living in San Francisco if they're going to keep me locked up in a box in my house, right? Where if I leave the house, my car gets destroyed. So I'll move out to Reno. I'll move up to Montana. I'll push out to Tennessee. Okay, I'll go to Texas. I'll move to Florida. I'll move to Georgia. So, so you're already starting to see the wave has already begun, Dave. So, which is good because we've been waiting to monetize this for a long time, and we're monetizing it. You and I we both made decisions in our life based on what we thought was going to happen, that we're now enjoying the fruits of it. You doing what you're doing on the ag and ag education side, and me on the trading side, is that people don't realize this. You and I have been talking. We're some of the first interviews that we ever had are with each other in this whole new world of podcasts. You and I have been doing this for 7 years, and you remember we were up at midnight trying to do things in Morse code. Now we have all this technology now. And when we were talking, this stuff was all coming in 5 or 6 years. Now this stuff's already in our rearview mirror, and now we're literally on the slip and slide. And so, so I think it's there, Dave. I just sense your frustration that they'll never openly talk about it. I think you're a minister hoping that the sinners come clean. Well, they're not going to come clean. They're going to be forced into church.
At needlepoint.
At needlepoint. So but look, you guys listening, take advantage of it. And if I could plug our service for a little
Please
bit,
do.
is that we do quite well. We understand the macro trends. That's my background, and we built algorithms to be able to monetize those activities, and so we have a very good track record on trading. We can see the good, we can see the bad. We don't get blinded by our own hopes and wishes. The market tells us where the activity is. So we have 2 algorithms that run together. One looks at the range, one looks at the trend, looks at the money flow, and then our trades are set up from that. So people who trade with us, stocks or crypto, you can get access to these tools. You get access to our chat room. I put a trade out every day. We put trades out on crypto every day. So you can go ahead and join us. We have 7 bundles we put together, from basic long-term trades to you can day trade in a VIP room, and 65% off pre-discounted. And if you want to just get promo code winter, you get 40% off of anything that's not bundled. And Dave, I shot over some notes of just some of our customers saying just this week, People are so thankful. We warned them after the holiday rally, the Christmas rally, if you will. We warned them on a hangover coming into this with Powell and inflation. Okay, and then we got people right back on these last 2 days where they're trying to squeeze the market from a short position. We caught these moves up again too. So we'll go ahead and get you on the right side of these trades. We'll help you make a lot of money, but more importantly, we'll give you a toolkit where you can actually be independent and become a more effective trader.
And remember, the Chinese have a saying about the world situation where we sit today: 危机, opportunity in the danger. So those two characters for 危机, one of them is opportunity and the other is danger, and you put those together and that creates that word. So think about where it is right now and the opportunities, because there is so much change, flux, chaos, and unknowns happening. But if you can forecast a little bit out there, Bob, I appreciate you spending your time with us today. And I'll leave that link in the description box below, so you can head over to tradelikeagenius.com and look a little more information, what might be suitable for you. Any last words, Bob?
No, I think what you and I talked about today is not going to change. So it might be ebbing and flowing, but these things are happening, and you need to get in front of them because they're just going to get more intense over the next 24 months.